Okay. Hi, Holly. How are you today?
Hey, good. How about you?
Good. So I'm hoping this conference will only take about 20 minutes and maybe less, maybe a little bit more, depending upon what we start to talk about. So you did a TDA on a text-dependent analysis question
Mhm.
on how the raindrop decided whether to help the farmer or not, and how that was the right decision, how we came to that decision. And you guys read the story. Let's see, I have it here. Do what you can.
Yes.
Okay, all right, good. So, how did you think the lesson went? What are your thoughts about the lesson?
Um, Overall, like their discussion about it verbally was pretty interesting. Like just, you know, sometimes writing it on paper is more difficult than just explaining it out and letting your thoughts be heard. I think as far as like the verbal part of it, they did pretty good. Um, There were some things though that I was thinking, well, that could have gone a little differently had I have had my thoughts together. Like I had it written all down and so forth. But when I started looking at their writings when they put it out, they did fairly well with it. They did add that personal response. Now, I do have about 3 out of those 15 who struggled with that. But as far as the majority of the class, they did well with including their personal thoughts on should how would you feel if you would have been the farmer or had you have been the raindrop. So it was good to see what they could come up with.
Okay, very good. And I noticed that the students, they seemed all very excited and very enthusiastic about um, talking through the story with you. I noticed that, and that they were all very energized and could really get into it. So that was really good. So I could see where um, the majority of them uh, kind of picked up and was able to add their own personal response to that. And I mean, I you picked on everybody so that they all could be heard. So that's really the main goal. I think you hit that on the head really well. They seem to all enjoy the story, enjoy the discussion. So that's really good. Now, so you thought the discussion went really well between the students and being able to identify their own personal thoughts in that. And now, what do you think? What part of the lesson did you think didn't go as planned? Let's put it that way, as planned.
I guess you could say, or I could say, just the presentation of restating that question and going through and doing that, and then going to the part of, well, where in this story, I just felt like it was very choppy, like it didn't flow like I was planning for it to. I think I just got a little sidetracked with whatever and lost that focus. But just the flow between the talking through the steps. I think some of them were a little more overpowering about it, and I was trying to find that happy medium of, okay, well, these kids need this to happen. These kids get it, where like just that scaffold through the process.
Okay.
Um, that's sort of where I was thinking.
And that seems like a natural progression that you were analyzing that and you could see unfolding in front of you the kids that, like you said, they got it, but this group not so much and this group not so much. So what's our next step going from there? So how can I help them get there?
Mhm.
And yeah, so those students who did get it, they kind of take over a little bit, right? And
Yeah,
overshadow
that's
the ones who
yeah.
are very quiet and don't want to ask those questions.
Yeah.
But on the opposite end of that, that's sometimes good because maybe they're going to pick up on something that their classmate can communicate, that maybe we can as teachers. I don't know.
Right.
Sometimes we don't talk kid language, and they can communicate with each other better than we can.
Oh, 100%. Because you could see when some of them were talking, you could see them. I don't know if you could, but they'd sit there and like, okay.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah,
you said that kid language, and they definitely, sometimes it's difficult to get down to that lingo that they use and how they think through the process. So I agree with you there.
right. For example, I had that today in my science lesson where we're talking about the different plant structures and classifications, and I was trying really hard to make sure that I was picking out examples for them that
Mhm.
were on their level. Like relating it to other animals and how we classify animals or how each person is different. So it is sometimes it's hard to get on their level, and we try really hard to make it understandable for them. But I
Yeah.
think for the most part, um, you did that, and like you said, the majority of the group, they looked and sounded like they were understanding and really started getting the wheels working to how to put that personal response on it. So that was great. Now, was there any other part of the lesson that you felt went totally off the mark or you need to really refine better?
Yeah, the closure.
The
Um,
closure? Okay, so what
that's
happened there?
not well, see, the closure part of it is always my weak point because you run out of time and it's time to switch back and it's like, oh my gosh, I just lost track of how far I was going past. My kids are standing out in the door and I'm like, oh well, I gotta think of that closure again, and I didn't give them that thinking moment or that closure of, well, what was the whole purpose for why we're doing this, just including that. I felt like I didn't, it was more so, let me go ahead and just add it in just because, and not actually sitting there and assessing, did they understand the purpose for why we do this, just and
Right,
having that
exactly.
accountability aside from the practice. So,
It's kinda like that wrap up where yeah, I mean, I've experienced it many times as well, where you're so into what you're doing, and next thing you know, it's time to move on to the
yeah,
next thing,
yeah.
and, then you're like, "Oh." Yeah, so I notice sometimes with, some of my lessons now what I've taken to doing because it's very easy to do on virtual where you could just keep going, going, going,
Yeah.
where I set a timer. So sometimes and it is really hard to get used to that where it's like, "Okay, I have to make sure I structure enough information in this 10 to 15 minutes, and then
Mhm.
transition to this next 15 minutes, and then be able to have time left over to make that wrap up, make that closure, so that you can have them have that like exit moment, that sink in.
Mhm.
So I completely understand. And I've done it many times myself. So maybe in the future, that might be something you might want to look at is maybe setting a timer
I think that'd be
and
a great
then
idea.
so that you can have that moment and then you're not rushed and they're not rushed and they're not all trying to get out the door like half of my third grade did. Okay, but I noticed the flow in your lesson, it flowed very nicely. I especially like the one transition in your lesson where you went from reviewing what they did the day before, and that transition was so seamless and so quick into the reading of this story and reviewing what you did with this story. That was a really nice transition, and it flowed really well and the students were all on task, all on target. It was a very smooth transition. So you've got that down. Not many students can, not many teachers, myself, have such smooth transitions. I know sometimes they can get out of control, but yours was nice and smooth.
I think I hit the luck of the day or something.
Right? We'll give credit to the students who are there, right? Like it's
Yeah.
them. Um, So did your materials and everything, did they meet the objective for your lesson, all your materials?
Yep, everything was there. It was ready to go. The kids already had majority of it since we had started the day before, and so they have their folder that they bring with them to class that they were able to just pull it right out and move on. And then the only thing though that I wish I would have done, and I didn't think about it till after, was making them a copy of the question themselves. And me, of all people, I should know that because I did it last year all the time. I just, so that way they could put their finger on it. They could make that note of, oh, this is what this means, instead of just mentally going through it by what I put on the board. I think that
Right.
could have helped as well.
That's good. That's good. And sometimes you go back and forth like that. Like you said, last year you did it all the time and that seemed to be really successful. And other times you may do that and the kids are more focused on the piece of paper in front of them than
Mm-hmm.
they are the discussion. So yeah, you really have to look at it and see what your students need at the moment.
Yeah.
Now, you had said before that you thought probably about 12 out of the 15 really got it. All right. So I guess we'll look at that more once we go over. Did you collect and like you graded them? So that's how you know you've got
Yes.
12 out of the
I
15?
I took them up and I read through them. That's how I was able to pick out going. Like I mentally thought about that rubric, you know, how we grade off the TDAs for SE Ready. I definitely kept that close by. So that way I could see, well, did they restate? Did they make that claim? Did they add their personal response to support why they think what the question or what the answer may be to that question? And a lot of them really went through the process of just restating the basic thing. The raindrop made the right choice by, and then they told why they thought, and then they included. Many of them did off of the raindrops perspective because they've always helped people, versus a few used the farmer and how the farmer he was wishing that somebody would help them just like they do whenever they're having to tote groceries inside. So it was interesting to see, but there were a few who just wrote, yes, the raindrop was right. They didn't support that of he made the right choice, you know. So I was able to gather that 12 out of the 15 based on what I'd read could include that response.
Now, what are you thinking to do for those three to help them get to that next level?
Well, I thought about taking a few minutes and going back and let's look at what they wrote versus, okay, now let's think about this. Whenever we're answering a question, it's proper way of doing, or at least I think, when you're saying yes, well, what are you saying yes about? What's the purpose for why you think he's right? And let them verbally tell me. And then, because sometimes whenever children verbally tell it, they're hearing themselves speak it, and then they're like, wait, that didn't make any sense. So I feel like if I do that, then I'll be able to get a better gauge on, is it that they really don't understand, or is it just putting it from their brain to the paper, you know? So
Exactly.
about doing that as a first step. And if that's not what it is, then I would take other measures to say, okay, well, they're not getting it anywhere. So
I agree. I think that would be a good first place to start with those three students. And you're right, absolutely. When kids verbalize first, it's easier for them to then put it into writing. So I think that's a good first place to start with those three. And I would think the best place to do that would be in a small group setting when you're going over. Everybody else is working on their next steps, I guess, at their
mhm.
seats, and you've got those three little babies right next to you, really working them through that so that even if it's just asking questions back and forth. And like you said, saying, okay, you're saying yes, but what are you saying yes to? I think a couple of times having a discussion like that might really benefit them. And I think
Mhm.
then they'll get the hang of it. And even right after you verbalize it, okay, let's write that down so that we know what we just said.
Yeah.
So that's a good starting place. Okay, so for the most part, it looks like the majority of the students met the objective, and you've got next steps planned out for the students who didn't. And those sound like very good next steps for them. Now, okay, so you have all of their writing and I guess their rubrics there with you after you collected them?
Well, I actually I didn't even think about it. I probably shouldn't have done this, but I gave it back to them and let
Okay,
them look through and stuff. I didn't even think to keep it for so I could show you like their artifacts. Sorry. I
that's
can
okay.
I can get them back. They're just in other classrooms and their doors are locked, so I can't
No,
get
that's but you have it now. Was this for a grade in the grade book, or was this
no,
just a like a
just a
daily
practice, like
activity
yeah,
practice? Okay. All right. Good. So you probably have that organized in a way for you so that you can use it for your group planning for the next time.
yes.
All right.
I made notes of which children needed this section of help, who needed it in the restating of the question, who was personal response, or who got it all. So I did.
Okay. Great. That sounds good. Now, would you agree that based on the evidence and the area of strength for this lesson, um, do you think it was a success? Like having all your evidence and everything that you've looked at for this lesson, do you think it was successful or not successful?
Overall, seeing that there were 12 out of 15 children who were able to accomplish that objective, I would say that it was fairly successful. I mean, I don't expect all my children to do it at one time because then you sort of lose that chance to, really hone in and build those kids back up from where they needed to be. And the other ones, they did well. So then that means I can take them to the next step in the challenge of writing an actual analysis instead of just basing it off of a question, how it normally goes for SE Ready.
Right. Okay, good. So, so definitely, I would say this, from what I was looking at and from what you're telling me based on the evidence, it really is. It's a good time for celebration. They really, it's a glow in this case. And those three little love bugs, they have a chance to grow. And that's a good ratio. So, like you said, so you're going to grow them to the next stage. And the other kids, they really have like a shining star. But now that doesn't say that they don't have room to grow too. You're
Absolutely.
definitely going to take them to the next step of SC Ready TDA writing. So definitely. Now, would you agree that based on your evidence, the area of improvement for this lesson is basically like your timing, your your timing of and your pacing of, so that you don't cut off that wrap up, but that the pacing maybe, or would you say a different part?
Oh, pacing is always seeming to be an issue. I would definitely work on that one for sure, which that's always like I try to balance it, but sometimes you just get into the time of discussion and stuff, which is perfectly fine. And if it takes longer, you just move it to the next day and continue on with that pacing. But there's always room to fix that for sure.
Right. You never want to just make it like a robot, like you were telling the kids the way
Right.
you do. It's not okay, 15 minutes, stop, restart. It's like you said, it's always good to, when you see them having a conversation like that, that's probably the best part because then
Yes.
you know they're really into it and they're really understanding you. So definitely. So pacing is something I think we all work on constantly as teachers. We're always working on trying to get everything we want out of our heads into their brains. And
Yes.
sometimes we go longer. All right, good. Now, do you feel your goals were met um, during this coaching cycle? Like, did I provide um, good advice or strategies that you might use for the next time?
Oh, definitely. That timer is a really great idea. That would definitely pace me, but also the kids would be like, "Oh, okay. Well, I think it overall would make a difference." And definitely, whenever talking through those objectives pre-conference, reminding, "Okay, well, this is your objective. This is what they need to meet. Okay, how are we going to get there?" And just discussing through that. So, yeah, I do.
Okay, thank you. And what would what would you like to focus on like in the future? What are some of your future goals that you would like a coach to help you with?
I think the next one, if I did, which I thoroughly like doing these things, there's always that room for growth and becoming better and adding more to your tool belt. So I think I would probably go back to the questioning piece. There's always room for that, the questioning to provide that rigor and really seeing what challenges you can give to the children. And coming up with questioning can be difficult. So I think that would be a good challenge for myself to try out again.
Good, definitely. Um, that's something that I've been looking at too during my graduate studies here is learning how to do better questioning, those depth of knowledge and trying to
Yes.
understand all that and the Bloom's taxonomy and just trying to really
Mhm.
understand how questioning goes. So definitely that's a good place to go because that lends itself for them learning better and us learning more of how to get into their heads. So I
Mhm.
definitely agree. Well, thank you, Holly. And if there's anything I can do for you in the future, just let me know.
I
And
most
thank you
certainly
for your
will.
time and your expertise.
Well, thank you for your help too. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if you ever need anything,